Joining me now to discuss the pause in the arms shipment to Israel is David Wurmser, Middle East Affairs Analyst at the Center for Security Policy. David, thanks so much for joining us. Good to see you again. To begin, the U.S. has paused a shipment of bombs to Israel over concerns that be used in a ground operation in Rafah that could hit civilians. How do you read this move coming from the U.S.?
Well, it's obviously an attempt to pressure Israel not to go into Rafah, or Rafah as the Arabs would call it. And it probably won't work because the Israelis see the absolute bottom line of their whole war, which comes after October 7th and the big invasion by Hamas and the killing of 1,500 civilians. They see the remaining stronghold of Hamas as something they have to remove to prevent another October 7th from happening. So they're not going to stop, and they're going to, and the pressure that the United States is trying to put on them not to go into Rafah is probably going to backfire, even with the threat of withholding weapons deliveries. In fact, it's not a threat. 2 months ago, some weapons began to be held up, and over the last week or two, weapons, 2,000-pound bomb guidance kits were already denied. So the embargo is already underway.
Now, according to reports, Israel is telling the U.S. the pause in arms could jeopardize hostage talks, adding the U.S. should pressure Hamas, not Israel. Now, NTD can't independently verify those reports, but we do know the relationship between Washington and Jerusalem is tense at the moment. What is your view on all of this?
Well, you raised a good point. Hamas wants to survive. It wants to retain the third of Gaza that still is under its possession so that it can rebuild, reconstitute, and do this again. And it sees the split between the United States and Israel as something that could lead to the Israelis pausing or stopping altogether, which allows them to survive. So at the moment, the only other option they have is giving up the hostages that they hold. So they've been negotiating, not in great faith, but they've been negotiating the hostage release in order to stop the Israelis from going in. As the clock's running out on that, the United States splitting with Israel actually encourages them not to give in on the hostage issue because they have another path to survival, American pressure. So it does distance a hostage deal on some level. But I think it's a misread by both Hamas and ultimately by Washington as to how much of a choice this really is for the Israeli government. They've convinced themselves this is Prime Minister Netanyahu's war, and that it's hardliners and Netanyahu's government pushing him. But the truth is, 70 to 80% of Israelis don't see victory without taking the entire Gaza Strip, and they don't see any goal for the war that's legitimate that supersedes this victory. So, frankly, 70 to 80% of Israelis are behind this, including the opposition has already said that it also believes that Rafah needs to be taken. So I think the leverage isn't what Washington thinks it is, unfortunately.
Now, in terms of the U.S.'s pause in weapons, do you think the upcoming U.S. presidential election played into that decision?
Yes, I think President Biden clearly is worried about Michigan and some of the progressive votes in Michigan. The progressives have said that they can vote for a third-party candidate or not vote. And it causes great concern for Biden. But I think it's actually politically overplayed. I think it's a lot of young party operatives who are more ideological than wise, because he's about to lose the Jewish vote. All the polls show that for the first time in history, the Jewish vote may turn against the Democrats. And the Jewish vote also accounts for a huge amount of the donor base on the national level of the Democratic Party. So this, again, is likely to backfire. But I think the party structures are controlled by some fairly ideological progressives who are allowing their ideological aims to cloud their political judgment.
Now, all of this does come as CIA Director Bill Burns met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to try and help secure a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. Where do you see ceasefire and hostage deals going?
Well, I think that Hamas sees the war having made, and Hamas really works with Iran. So you have to look at what Iran wants. And Iran loves to see this split between Israel and the United States. It knows that compromises Israel's ability to take on Hezbollah in the north. So they're going to keep pushing Hamas to keep pushing. So I think that essentially this has killed the ceasefire talks.
David Wurmser, Middle East Affairs Analyst at the Center for Security Policy. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.